Every waking second, your brain is bombarded by an overwhelming onslaught of sensory data, social narratives, and incoming information. It is metabolically impossible to independently verify every single fact you encounter. The sheer computational load required for focused reasoning, contradiction testing, and continuous uncertainty monitoring burns through enormous amounts of cellular energy. To function efficiently without exhausting its energy reserves, the human brain relies on socially transmitted knowledge. Biologically, trust functions as a probabilistic computation designed specifically to reduce cognitive load. While we assume our minds objectively seek the truth, the nervous system actually defaults to minimal resistance cognition. Because of this drive for maximum energy efficiency, the brain prioritizes internal stability. Emotions strongly dictate belief formation, frequently overriding factual accuracy to resolve internal tension. Since human cognition is hardwired to prioritize emotional comfort over objective truth, we must establish a formal, mathematical framework to evaluate the reliability of our subjective beliefs. The Brain Kinematics Model maps human cognition as transformations of physical strain dynamics. This diagram illustrates that concept on a three-dimensional topographical grid. Sensory inputs exist as points on the ground level. External narratives warp that grid downward, creating deep, gravity-like pockets known as attractor basins. When incoming information matches our existing emotional biases, it simply falls into these established basins, integrating with almost zero metabolic effort. High internal emotional strain creates internal turbulence. Adopting an external narrative provides immediate low-energy resolution, stabilizing the system. This reveals a critical neurological reality. People do not find the truth and then feel secure. They feel secure and therefore assume they have found the truth. An absolute, fixed belief resolves the exhausting chaos of uncertainty almost instantly. Because belief adoption is primarily a mechanical, emotional stabilization process, it is highly vulnerable to manipulation. That vulnerability leads directly to the cognitive trap of symbolic recursion, the process where beliefs are built upon other beliefs rather than direct experience. In the BKM, every layer of recursive abstraction, believing a narrative about a narrative, stacks vertically. This creates a pillar that physically distances the attractor basin from the sensory ground where direct verification occurs. Repeated exposure to a narrative continuously polishes the cognitive pathway, lowering processing difficulty. This is known as the illusory truth effect. The brain registers this ease of processing and falsely equates familiar repetition with factual safety. When highly synchronized collective beliefs undergo this process, the results are massive, unified errors, like ideological propaganda or financial bubbles. Group consensus successfully eliminates internal cognitive contradiction for the individual, but it provides zero guarantee of actual reality coupling. A deeply held, highly synchronized belief can be a complete hallucination if it lacks grounding in sensory reality. If human confidence and group consensus are not reliable evidence, how do we systematically measure credibility? We must completely separate a speaker's emotional certainty from the verifiable evidence supporting their claim. To achieve this, we use the statistical concept of variance as our primary proxy for testimonial reliability. This graph charts reliable, converging, independent testimony. When independent observers agree, they create a stable, tight distribution curve, where low variance equals high reliability. Contradictory reports create informational entropy. High variance across reports equates directly to high uncertainty. When independent observers strongly disagree, that testimonial variance actively destroys the credibility of the claim. Signal detection theory adds another layer, requiring us to measure an agent's noise tolerance and their baseline confidence calibration to accurately assess their reports. Measuring the statistical spread and variance of independent reports provides our first rigorous, objective filter against subjective noise. We can synthesize all of these qualitative factors into a single, formal mathematical heuristic. This is the Credibility Reliability Index, or CRI. Because positive evidence and independent sources compound each other's strength, they sit in the numerator as multipliers. These drivers, consistency, independence, and prediction, collectively amplify the signal. C represents source consistency, and I stands for independent confirmations. The compounding effect of independent convergence is mathematically much stronger than simply repeating one source. P is predictive success. Successfully predicting an outcome is the highest multiplier for truth, as it is exponentially harder to achieve than post hoc explanation. Factors that introduce uncertainty or bias act as mathematical divisors, creating informational drag that dilutes the overall reliability. Sigma represents the variance among reports. Large disagreements spread the probability thin, dragging down the score. D represents distortion distance. Each layer of abstraction separating a claim from physical reality is a new opportunity for error, dividing our confidence. E is emotional loading. Ideological and fear-based triggers are heavy divisors because they actively bypass the brain's verification pathways. A high CRI score is only achievable when tight, predictive evidence is powerful enough to overcome the divisors of emotional variance and abstract distortion. We can translate this rigorous equation back into operational logic for anyone operating under severe time constraints. This geometric credibility triangle visualizes the daily balancing act. The top point presses downward with the weight of emotion, incentive, and contradiction. The wide base pushes upward, supporting the claim with evidence, independence, and prediction. The functional goal of everyday cognition is rarely finding absolute truth. The goal is reducing the probability of a catastrophic error. Absolute certainty works against that goal. Cognitive systems that refuse to process contradiction become brittle. When an inflexible belief system is struck by contradictory physical evidence, it inevitably shatters. The scientific alternative is provisional belief. Through Bayesian updating, minds revise their internal probabilities dynamically as new data arrives. Instead, an adaptable provisional belief system is able to stretch, seamlessly catch, and incorporate new counter-evidence without ever breaking. The ultimate practical test for any external narrative is asking one direct question: what specific evidence would actually change your mind? Reliable thinkers specify falsifiable conditions. Unreliable systems endlessly reinterpret counterexamples to protect their existing attractor basins. Optimal human cognition requires resisting the brain's desire for lazy emotional comfort. Instead, we must choose to tolerate the metabolic strain of uncertainty, continuous error correction, and grounded verification.